All right, now welcoming back on to Tennis Channel Inside In. Friend of the show, been a few months. Somebody who is a former top 5 player, broadcaster for the BBC. And I should point this out, Greg, during the week of the Paris Masters, you won this event in 1998. It's Greg Rusedski back again. Welcome to the program. Good to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you quickly because I was doing the research. You know, Paris is a very fun indoor event in Bercy, the only indoor Masters. I'm sure you got some fond memories beating Pete Sampras in straight sets in that final.
Yeah, I mean, one of the highlights of my career, I mean, I used to train with Courier and Sampras when I was a 17-year-old in Saddlebrook, and never managed to beat Pete until that final in Paris, and he was going on his run for trying to end of season 6 years in a row as world number one, and to beat him in straight sets to win my first Masters Series finals was a lot of fun because I knew Sampras wanted to win desperately, and be able to shake Pete's hand and say, I finally beat you after all those years being the little gopher water boy, as you say, training with those two legends when I was a youngster.
Yeah, and I guess I could ask you too. I mean, it was a great run. I was doing the research, beating Kafelnikov in the semis, and then the final, which was best of 5, which some of the younger folks don't quite realize it was a different time then that you're playing these heavy matchups. But how'd you kind of just stay in that zone and stay on that run when you have a huge win, but now you're going up against a titan in the sport the very next day?
Well, it was strange. There's very few times you wake up and you know you're going to win a match before you play it. I remember having this conversation with McEnroe when he won his first Wimbledon finals. And he said, the day I woke up that day against Bjorny, I knew I was going to win my first Wimbledon title. And that morning I woke up against Sampras and I was just seeing the ball like a beach volleyball. I just couldn't miss anything. And I just woke up and I knew I was going to win. It's the most surreal feeling as a professional. I wish it happened in a major finals for me, but it was great that it happened one or two occasions. That was the one occasion where I played Pete in the finals, and I just knew I was going to win before I struck the first ball. You just have this sense after years of training and practicing that it's just your day. So to beat Pete in the final was very special for me.
That's special stuff indeed. And before we get to this year's Paris and some other stuff, I did want to ask you too, as your broadcasting career, you were on the site of the Six Kings Slam in Saudi Arabia. It was tremendous from a production standpoint. Before we get to Rafa and Novak and Sinner winning the event, what was the experience like covering such a unique and such a highly produced event in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I thought they did a spectacular job. I think, the trailer and the advertisement for the event, how many millions did they spend on that? It was like Game of Thrones mixed with Vikings and so forth for each character. I mean, they made the Six Kings look rather special, and they really threw out the kitchen sink to make this one of the best events I've been to in a long time. I mean, everybody's talking about the opening match on Twitter and social media. Oh, Medvedev only won 3 games. Medvedev was trying from the first game to the last game. Sinner was just absolutely brilliant on that day, and these guys were going hammer and tong in every single match. Not one corner was given. So I think it was a huge success. I really enjoyed it, and that final we had was Sinner and Alcaraz. I mean, my gosh, it's taken Sinner all year to finally beat him. He's lost him 3 straight times this year, and neither one gave a corner. It was a proper serious event.
It's funny you say that because I had Magnus Norman on the show, coach of Stan Wawrinka, and they were practicing in Beijing before the tournament started. And he said that both him and Stan were like laughing at how good Sinner was. Like, it's a joke, the level that him and Alcaraz have taken their games. It shows you just how hard it is to even compete at that level, let alone win some matches at the top.
Well, you've got to look at them. They've looked up to the big 3, Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal. The records they've created is just astonishing. And if we look at Sinner and Alcaraz, everybody's, what's going to happen when the big 3 drop out? Who's going to replace them? And the irony of the situation is you've got Sinner who's won 2 majors this year. Alcaraz is ahead of pace of anybody, winning his first 4 in a row. And they're both complete players now. Sinner, to me, is the most improved with his serve, his drop shot, his volleys in transition. And they're just taking tennis to another level. But there's one guy let's not forget about, Novak Djokovic. He's the guy who's still going to be part of the mix. And he was absolutely gutted to lose to Sinner because he had a chance at 3-all in that final set. Break points, just pushed a forehand a little bit. Could have been more aggressive on the break point. We might be talking about Novak right now, so don't take him out of the picture. But Alcaraz and Sinner this year at the majors have been the guys to beat.
Yeah, Djokovic, and you were on this show saying it's still always about the gold medal, even when he got injured in Paris, which We were talking too before we started. The gold medal was insanely impressive, but maybe getting the Wimbledon final on one leg is on that same level.
Well, I think from my point of view, it just shows you the greatness of Novak. He's done everything in our sport apart from the gold medal. So if you would say, okay, have 2 or 3 majors this year or 1 gold medal, it would be the gold medal. And he knew this was probably one of his last chances to achieve that feat with the standard he's playing. So it just shows the mental fortitude to be able to do that. And then, you talk about the Wimbledon final. I was shocked he played Wimbledon. I mean, it was less than 3 weeks since he had surgery. I saw him practicing the week before Wimbledon, and I was like, he's just using this for prep for the Olympics. And he got to the finals on 1.5 legs. I mean, it's an incredible feat. I mean, that's what a great champion he is. And Alcaraz, to me, played a phenomenal final. I mean, I looked at Alcaraz's game and I thought, okay, the serve's a little weak. It's an area that needs to be improved. The backhand can get better. The shot selection's interesting at times. But that final was an immaculate performance from Alcaraz. I mean, absolutely brilliant. I mean, he was just too good this year for Novak.
Yeah, just the very end, he got a little tight. Novak dug deep and extended that third set. But yeah, it was phenomenal. And I will say too, Novak not playing. We mentioned it last week. He's not playing Paris. The Tour Finals is in doubt for Turin. None of us are really shocked by this, Greg, and you can speak to this. He's at a point in his career where now that he has the Olympics, there's one thing that matters, it's the majors, and the prep time to start the season is so important to him. What's your take on the availability, when we're going to see Novak, and how much match time he needs, and ultimately that goal of winning another Grand Slam?
I don't think he needs the match time on court. I think he needs to get healthy. We still see the knee brace there, that keeps it covered. Once that disappears, and we don't see him with that knee warmer or whatever he's using, he's back. Last season, he didn't have an off season to speak of because he won Turin, finals of Davis Cup, couldn't get the prep he wanted for 2024, and then picked up that injury at the French Open. So for me, if Novak is 100% healthy, gets fit, then he's in the mix to win every major next year again. And don't discount Novak. So from my point of view, health is your wealth. The older you become, the smarter you have to become. And he knows these things. He's looked at Federer. He's looked at Rafa. He's looked at the competition, that he has to change a few things to beat the likes of Sinner and Alcaraz back to back. So off season to me is huge. And the longer he can make his off season, the better off he'll be for 2025. So I'll be surprised if he plays in Turin or plays any more tennis this season, but never discount. The one thing I would say, though, with Novak, I'd love to see is for him to hire a world-class coach. I think, he's got his physical fitness trainer he had in the past and his physio, so that's set on the team. The world-class coach is only there to give him sometimes strong opinions, I think. Because what are you going to tell a guy who's won 24 majors, Olympic gold? You need somebody who's just going to have a strong voice in the camp and work together with Novak to just get those little tweaks and little preparation. And that's what Ivan Isavic did incredibly well, winning 12 majors with him. And it was quite a strong character. And he made some changes with the serve and those things. So, that's the one thing I think would be interesting if you add someone into that team for the coaching aspect, because I think that could make the difference against maybe the Sinners or the Alcarazes when you're allowed to coach courtside now.
For as great as he is, and even, as passionate, you can call it demonstrative, whatever it is, Novak has always been someone that likes collaboration. He'll work with other people. He loves getting ideas and processing it. So, I think that's a great point, Greg. I also think it is very, very funny or ironic in a lot of ways that the quote-unquote worst year he's had in a long time still had the gold medal and still would be better. Still 98% of the tour would take this as their best year. So
it's like put things into perspective. 99%. I think you're being a little bit harsh with 98. I mean, if you look at it, semis of Australian, finals of Wimbledon, quarters of the French where he had to pull up because of injury, so he didn't even get to complete it, Olympic gold medal, and big upset maybe at Popperin at the US Open. But apart from that, I mean, that's career defining for most people. I mean, that is a phenomenal year, but his standards are so highly set. If you're not winning 2 majors a year, you've had a bad year. And that just shows you the greatness of the man, that's the expectation still at this age.
Certainly does. And Greg, looking at, the Saudi Arabia event, one final note, it was Rafael Nadal's penultimate act. He's going to play the Davis Cup final. That will be the last event representing Spain there in Spain. But he goes to Saudi Arabia, loses his matches, plays Djokovic one more time, which was special, played a match against Alcaraz. But What was the reaction on site for that? Because it is very impressive just how adored he is wherever he goes, and how, no one wants to say goodbye to him. It does feel like it's time, but there's never a proper send off. This seemed like it was a pretty close thing to that, though.
It was incredible, the two matches he played there.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first one was against Carlos Alcaraz. It's kind of like passing of the baton to the next Spanish superstar and legend of our sport. The crowd was behind Rafa from the first ball to the last ball. Djokovic was pretty comfortable for a set and a half. And then, boy, did the crowd get into the 7,500 people were making more noise. They were trying to will a third set there. And he got a wonderful ovation. He's one of the legends, greatest sportsmen, I think, of any tennis player out there. Never threw a racket, never broke a racket, always polite, a gentleman. And if you wanted one player to compete for your life, it's Rafa. The guy never gave less than 110% in anything he did on a tennis court. So he will truly be missed after the Davis Cup. But it was a great send-off to see Novak and Rafa the last time before he ends his professional career on tour.
Yeah, Novak saying, like, please don't go, stick around a little bit for a little while longer. No, and we've shared tennis stories on this show, but you touched on something I think needs more, announcement to the public, like how polite he was, just how nice his reputation is, that if you didn't know him, which would be hard to do, but you wouldn't know that he won all these majors because of how he treats people. And that's just such a rare and special quality.
Oh, it's tremendous. I mean, he came to shake every broadcaster's hand after the matches. He thanked all the ball kids, all the organization, signed as many autographs as he possibly could after losing both matches that he played. And I think it's the background that Uncle Tony could be considered one of the greatest coaches of all time in the history of our sport. He had rules. You never throw your equipment, you never misbehave, and there's standards I expect. Yeah. And he's taken that mantra throughout his career. I mean, you look at the great Djokovic, the great Federer. Even Federer's thrown his racket and broken rackets during his professional career. Rafa, I think, is the only player that has never, ever thrown or broken his racket. I mean, that in itself speaks volume. And just his manners and the way he's brought up by his family is exceptional. So he will truly be missed.
We got more with Greg Rusedski here on Tennis Channel Inside In. We're talking all things tennis as the season winds down in 2024. Got a couple champions from last week to get to, and one who plays tennis in your backyard. Jack Draper wins the biggest title of his career, wins Vienna, a 500 event, beats Karen Khachanov in a thrilling final that seemed comfortable at first, and then it wasn't, but Draper pulls it out late in the second set. But this was an impressive match. It was an impressive run. Greg, this is somebody that's had some hype, that's been putting it together, had the title on grass, and is really rounding into form at the end of the year. So full marks to Jack Draper, someone I think you expected to be here, maybe even a little quicker than we have seen him now.
Well, I think with Jack, I've always said he's going to be a top 10 player. There's no question about it. But health is your wealth. And the problem with Jack last few seasons, he hasn't been healthy. He's had too many injuries. Even after the U.S. Open, he had an injury and then came back in Vienna and played exceptionally well. I think also that little time he spent with Wayne Ferreira alongside his coach, James Trotman, who's one of the best coaches in Britain, allowed him to realize that I need to take control of things. I need one voice in my head. And it's having that sort of knowledge and determination and using your tools and how to manage those things. And I think what I like about him, he's very honest how he speaks about things. When he lost in the U.S. Open, he says, I put too much pressure on myself. I feel anxiety. I feel a little bit nervous at times. And dealing with all those issues. And he's got game. I mean, big lefty, big serve, unbelievable returns, great ground strokes. He's improved his transition game coming forward. So I think he's one of those guys who's definitely going to be in the top 10 in 2025. And right now he's coming into form really, really well. So, wonderful opportunity to finish off this season very strong.
Yeah, I like the fact that he won in a couple different ways. Thomas Mahac, who's been playing great, the Czech player, he beats him. It's a longer, drawn-out match. He's able to play efficient tennis when he needs to. He really does give players problem with his serve, the lefty game. He was crushing his forehands up the line, Greg. And then, of course, you mentioned it. If his body holds up, he's the athlete that can compete at the top. He has the game. It's so tough to keep climbing. But, yeah, top 10, if not higher, seems like it's the ceiling. So, yeah, maybe you guys have a guy in Great Britain to kind of carry the mantle.
Well, we've been talking about him the last few years, and we've been very fortunate in this country, after my career and Tim Henman's, that we had Andy Murray show up, achieve amazing things. Then Cam Norrie was the surprise to all of us.
Mhm.
I mean, he's a maximizer, top 10 player, guy who's won Indian Wells. But Jack, we knew about him for a long time, junior Wimbledon finalist. We thought, okay, it's going to take him a little bit of time to progress to get there. But now that he's finally healthy, the tools are there. And also, everybody doesn't talk about his backhand, how good his two-handed backhand is. There's not really any weaknesses from the back of the court as well with the explosive forehand. So I think if he can progress the way he did this year and then push on in the offseason and get even stronger physically, watch out 2025. There's no reason why he can't climb into the top 5, but first 10, then you go by single digits. It's a difficult climb.
So the other champion we have this week, and maybe someone near and dear to your heart, but by the way he plays, but Giovanni MPetshi Perricard. I know, and the giggle there, I agree, because it's how he was serving, and it's more than just a serve in his game to win a title like this and beat Ben Shelton in the final, but 123 mile an hour average on his second serve. I mean, that's next level.
It is next level, but you know what I like about him? He plays a game to win. He knows what he has to do out there. He's not trying to kick in the serve. He's not trying to get in long rallies. He says, this is what I do better than anybody. I got huge power on the first and the second serve. I take a rip at the ball, and I make you feel under pressure. A lot of guys like rhythm tennis. There's not much variety sometimes. I mean, Shelton's coming forward more these days, or transitioning. You got Alcaraz and Sinner who are more complete. And the game is evolving, but the last generation has been more baseline play. So it's quite nice to see an old school sort of style, crush it and bash the ball in short, sharp points. So very, very impressive what the Frenchman has accomplished.
One-handed backhand too, which he was cracking. So we got a throwback there.
He can crack a one or two-hander. I mean, the guy is a physical specimen.
Huge,
he's so strong.
Yeah, huge specimen out there. And what is really his rookie year. So this is probably the most raw he's going to look. So there's room to grow there, which is scary. But to win that Basel title, Greg, he beats Felix Auger-Aliassime, Shapovalov, Holger Rune, and Ben Shelton. He's now 5-1 against the top 20 in his young career, and he's won his last 6 matches. He just beat Tiafoe today in Paris without dropping his serve. So this is a heat check.
And he lost the opening set as well in a tiebreaker. So you got to think to yourself, it's very simple the way he plays. And coaching, you don't want to complicate things with him. And the rawness is part of this fear factor. What the guys will start doing on tour is starting to look into data. We'll look onto patterns of play, where he likes to go on big points, because it's almost like playing someone like Ivo Karlovic. You'd have to take a calculated guess on the big points and just say, there's some games I'm going to be walking right and left. And he's got a little bit more tools from the back of the court than Karlovic had, and more physicality. So it's a daunting prospect, and I think his coach has done a phenomenal job with him.
Winning today was huge, beating Tiafoe, bouncing back. There was no letdown. That's a tough match. He wins that, battles back from a set down. Yeah, you're walking right or left, or in Shelton's case, maybe getting hit, because he actually took a few on the arm in that match. So, no, there's a lot to like. The raw factor there, he's playing very well. For Ben Shelton, Greg, it was, a tough match, but he had a good tournament. He beats Andre Rublev in there. It's tough when you're going up against a guy who's serving. He competed admirably. He's still looking to have that big breakthrough, but still plenty of time. How would you assess where Ben Shelton is as 2024 wraps up?
Well, I think he's had a great year. I think his dad's done a great job with his whole team of, getting a little bit more consistent in 2024. I think, it's just getting a little bit solider on the returns, keep on improving that backhand side, and just learning how to play the bigger moments and using that energy, because he's got that wonderful youthful spirit of exuberance and flash. And I love the way he serves and volleys and comes in and mixes it up. So I think, with the right sort of big points, that's where he's got to get better at the big moments on the big points against the very best. And his progression, he's better than he was in 2023. So there's no reason why 2025 can't be that year where he breaks through between 10 and 5. Because he's got the tools. He's explosive.
How would you, and I'm going to ask you this question as one of the game's premier servers in your era, but when you look at Shelton, and I know you mentioned data earlier, but return stats, return numbers, is there a way for a player like him to kind of approach picking up more percentage points, getting more successful on your return?
Well, what's your number one priority practicing? Return to serve. Yeah. That's a daily must. And you got to get righties, lefties serving at you. Just do the drill as we like to call it over here, return and then the shot after the return. Just targets. The serve and the +1 are incredible. And now he has to bring that return +1 shot better. And that's where you look at somebody like Novak Djokovic, to me, the greatest of all time. I mean, when Ivanisevic joined the team, the serve +1 became monstrous, one of the best in the world. Before that, it was solid. It wasn't great. So that's an area I'm sure he's working with his team on. I know he works exceptionally hard on court as well as off court, but just a little bit more attention to those areas. And there's no reason why he can't get better in those areas. And it's also belief. It's like reading the ball. The more you practice something, the better you get. Just spend the hours on it. That's what all the greats do, and that's why they're greats of the game.
He's certainly close, and it is an interesting time for American tennis. Tiafoe's raised his level. Taylor Fritz officially today is in the ATP Tour Finals. Second time in 3 years. He was a semifinalist in 2022. Still holding the mantle, but there's guys like Shelton that are pushing upwards. So American tennis is still just yearning for that slam breakthrough.
Well, I mean, Taylor came close getting to the finals. It was a heck of an effort for him to make his first major final. I think you've got 3 guys that are knocking on the door, and you need that little X factor, I would say, because you've got to push through Sinner or Alcaraz or both back-to-back, as well as Novak.
Yeah.
And that's a real hard task. And I think there's areas in each one of their games that has to get a little bit better. And it has to be more consistent, and you have to be more efficient on the earlier rounds. I mean, look how efficient Sinner was to win the U.S. Open. Everybody's thinking, okay, he's got to deal with all this stuff off court. How's he possibly going to win the title? None of us experts picked him. He lost 2 sets and won the title. I mean, that is mental fortitude. And he's a better tennis player than he was 2 months before leading into that tournament. And that's what those guys have to look at. How am I going to beat those guys? What do I need to improve in my game? And where's my mentality? You look at a guy like Sinner, he never loses focus once. Okay, that's where Fritz, Tiafoe, and Shelton need to be a little bit better on that focus. And that's a learned skill and improve certain areas in their game. If they do, they can get semis, finals, but to win, you got to up it again, because those 3 guys right now are the genre, but they're in the mix.
Yeah, that's a great insight from someone that's lived that. Also, if I have this right, you're not chasing like a tangible level, because those guys are getting better too. So there's not like, okay, if I get to here, I'm good, because they're going to keep improving too. It's all task there is.
The most impressive thing for me when I was watching the Six Kings Slam was how much Sinner has improved, even from New York. I mean, that's a frightening thought.
Right,
and the irony of the situation, he'd lost to Alcaraz on 3 occasions this year, never beaten him. And then he finds a way to win. I mean, the drop shot is something he didn't have in his arsenal whatsoever. The volleys were average. Those 2 areas are pretty dang good now and nearly world class to where they need to be. And those guys keep on adding dimensions. It's like I look at Medvedev, who Sinner beat, and Medi's volleys need to be better. The drop shot needs to be added to his arsenal. And he's a guy who's been number 1 and won majors. So you got to think, you've got to keep on getting better. If you don't, there's only one direction you're going. And Sinner and Alcaraz are hungry to be greats of the game. So if you're that round below those guys, with Djokovic included, you better keep on improving and then improving some more.
It's a tall task. We'll see who's up for it. More here with Greg Rusedski before we wind this one down. Wanted to talk the ATP Paris Masters this year. Mentioned it, the final Masters event of the season, the only one on indoor hard. It's a raucous environment and a unique field this year, Greg, because a 7-time champion Novak Djokovic not here. Alcaraz and Sinner don't have this title yet in their trophy case. Still a loaded field and still so much to play for. And as I mentioned, the crowd in Paris will always support their guys and really maybe swing some matches.
Oh, the one thing about playing Bercy, the center court in the stadium's electric. It's loud. If they don't like anything, they whistle, they boo. They don't care if you're playing the point. If they love you, they'll cheer from you from the first point to the last. If you're French, you're getting that extra support. I mean, you couldn't ask for more with Sinner and Alcaraz right now. And they're desperate to win that title, because you want to win the majors, you want to win the end of season championships, but you want to win every Master Series to be great of our game as well too. So this is a
Yeah.
big title. And also Turin's coming up as well afterwards. So to win Bercy, I think the last year being there at this stadium would be a
Yeah.
special feat for anybody. And, they've had a little bit of time to adjust as well. So I think we're going to have a stellar semis and finals in Paris this year.
You also could see Daniil Medvedev versus the Paris crowd, which we know is always a treat.
I love Daniil Medvedev, and I look at his numbers. He's a little bit down on his numbers on first serve points won, second serve points won this year. We talked about adding a little bit more in the volleys because I think his footwork can change up a little bit. The drop shot can be added, and he's a character. I love Daniil. He's one of my favorite players to watch out there, and I love his personality. He's got a great sense of humor, and he's not worried about playing the villain and standing up for what he believes. I think characters are so important in our sport. And, if he doesn't like something, the crowds, and they don't like his behavior, they'll get on him. So he's great for tennis.
Yeah, and he doesn't care if you don't like him, and that's like the best quality. Because if he's like, "Fine, you don't like me, it doesn't not my problem."
But the other thing is, you got to make sure you're winning if you're going to play that character.
Right. Well, the rest of the contenders in the field, I mean, Holger Rune won this title in 2022. Still crazy to think he beat 5 top 10 players to do it, which is just an absurd stat. But you have Holger, you have Taylor Fritz, who likes to play on these surfaces. Anybody else? Zverev, anybody else on the outside that could make a run at this thing?
Well, I think you kind of got the mix that's really got a chance to win this. And also, let's not forget there's qualification still for the last top eight finishers in Turin. So I think they're pretty fresh. They're pretty hungry. And I think you've got the group there. Holger, to me, is the interesting one because he's back with Lars Christensen after having more coaches this year and people on the team that I can remember of any top player. And let's not forget, he beat a certain Novak Djokovic in that finals. And indoor season is usually pretty good for Holger, but it's getting that mindset there that he needs to get himself where he was 2 years ago because he's kind of dropped off the pace this season compared to where he was.
Yeah, the coaching situation's been a bit of a turnstile for Holger, to say the least. But, in his mind, he thinks he should be right there with Alcaraz and Sinner. So he's got, a lot of ground to make up. But
I think he has the tools, but it's also getting that mindset. I think it's the belief and the consistency because, I watched him play Alcaraz, and for 9 games, perfect, really, really good. Then he loses the opening set. He just disappears a little bit here.
Yeah,
you can't afford to disappear for 2-3 points here or there, 1 or 2 points against the very best guys. If you do that, they punish you, and you just don't get a way back in.
Yeah, at Wimbledon, it was against Novak, and it was the first 7 games of the match. He just wasn't there ready, and it was, in a hole quick, too much to overcome. Well, a couple things before I let you go, Greg. Always a blast, always a chat. We have to give props to. He played his last match at Bercy, Richard Gasquet. One of the final French guys from that era, still hanging around. He loses his last match to Bergs at Bercy. Will retire at RG next year, but an underrated, in a lot of ways, underappreciated career for one of the most beautiful one-handed backhands we've seen.
I mean, he was the anointed one in French tennis. They had him on the cover of all their tennis magazines when he was a 15-year-old. He was the one who was supposed to be Roger Federer of French tennis. Huge expectations put on his shoulders. Achieved a lot in his career. If you get the top 10 in the world in anything, you're usually considered a success. But the expectation for him was you got to be number one, winning multiple majors. I think he maximized his game. Unbelievable one-handed backhand. Just beautiful the way he'd executed. Yeah. On clay, one of the best movers as well. And he should be so proud of his accomplishment and longevity in his career.
He should. And it still makes me giggle a little bit when I see the clip of him and Nadal at 13 years old playing in that final in front of actual fans. So it was a certain throwback. Well, last thing, Greg Rusedski, have to ask you, we'll leave on this. Where are we at? Where are you at with the serve clock and some of the ATP complaints that we've seen?
Well, I think any which way we can speed up the game of tennis is a positive because you got to look at the people that watch our sport. They want to see things sped up. They don't want to see long changeovers, people sitting down. So I'm kind of up for speeding up our sport as much as we possibly can. And also then it makes people have different options. The serve and volley gets thrown in once in a while. The miss of the first serve. There's different tactics that get brought in. So I'm quite happy with the shot clock, and speeding things up is always my choice, I would say. Faster is always better, and it doesn't always make the best quality, but it makes a unique tactical decisions and choices that have to be made.
I had a feeling you would go in that direction. Also, the entertainment side was nice. It's good. We're trying to sell this sport and make it exciting. So,
Well, the other thing you've got to think is we have our core fans who are always going to be there, but we also have to bring in that new generation. The other thing, as well as I think allowing clips to YouTube and stuff like that, like the NBA does. You can take any clip or anything with the rights and put it on without having a problem. You know, that's something our sport has to do, is to get into social media, bring people who are non-tennis fans. Because I have friends of mine who are those people doing the dance on Wimbledon, which was Sabalenka and Ons Jabeur, you know, who knew nothing about tennis. And so they get an interest because they see these clips on social media, or they see a cool play that happens, you know, or they see something with the controversy of a double bounce. And that brings people into discussions. I mean, if I look at my generation when I was watching tennis, it was McEnroe, Borg, Chrissy, Martina, the longest rivalry in sports. And you knew them outside of the tennis court. You really knew about their private lives. You watched them to either win or to lose. You had your favorites. And it's all those little things. And you got to remember, the marketplace is so much bigger now than it was in that generation.
It is. And that sounds like an argument for not going all electronic, keep the personality involved. You know, some conflict can be good. So I'm with you there. I think it's good.
Conflict always brings more eyeballs, no matter what it is, whether it's good or bad.
Oh, that's the truth. That is certainly true. Well, Greg Rusedski, I can't thank you enough for always doing the show. It's always a blast. We get to learn something on this show, which is good too. So we're still going to, finish this season strong, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you on Tennis Channel Inside In. Best of luck with your broadcasting, your rest of your endeavors going on. And as always, appreciate talking tennis with you here on the podcast.
Thanks so much.